I could feel very high.
It's a new day on the Enterprise, and we're in the Berman chamber. We've been down to the planet of the Cretasans, those aliens we annoyed last season by eating in front of them, and because we need to buy an engine part from them. This meeting went equally poorly for reasons we don't quite understand, and we didn't get the part. Even worse, Porthos, dog in space, appears to have picked up a bug during the visit and is being kept back for treatment. Archer wants to tell the Cretasans to bollocks and put the whole planet far behind us, but Tucker thinks that's a terrible plan. We can technically fly without the gizmo they sell, but not if another one breaks, and we don't know when we'll find the next space Tesco that stocks them. Under the circumstances, it might be wiser to kiss some ass. News from Sickbay does not increase Archer's desire for apologies. Porthos, dog in space, is very ill indeed, and it's something the Cretasans could have predicted if they checked the biological data we sent before visiting. We have a little good news from T'Pol, though, as we found out what upset them this time. There were some decorative trees outside an official building, ones with significant cultural value, and apparently Porthos, dog in space, decided to piss on one of them. Being told T'Pol's already apologized on his behalf doesn't help his mood, and neither does her trying to suggest the part is more important than his feelings. Perhaps an attempt to improve his mood is why he decides to spend the night in Sickbay, or maybe he's only just read the title of the episode. Either way, an update from Phlox lets him know the bug itself is defeated, but it did a number on the immune system of Porthos, dog in space. Archer tries to get some sleep, only to be interrupted by Phlox's personal grooming habits. A second interruption about an hour later to feed the medical menagerie has Archer conclude this was a shit plan, and he buggers off somewhere else instead. The somewhere else is the onboard gym, Archer presumably having given up on the idea to sleep. If his plan was to burn away the anger, he's shit out of luck. T'Pol's already in there, and she's blunt when giving her opinion that all of this is largely Archer's fault. The ding-dong is interrupted by Hoshi telling us the Cretasans have called to let us know how we can make amends. It's not quite as bad as Archer was expecting at least, and he decides to have another go at getting some sleep in Sickbay before responding. It's partially successful. He does indeed manage to nod off, but not for long before the alarm sounds. Porthos, dog in space, is reacting badly to Phlox's medication. Some different meds solve the issue for the moment, and Phlox starts work on another treatment. He also asks Archer how things are going with the Cretasans. Maybe it's to distract him, or maybe it's because he's concerned about Archer's mental state. He certainly seems curious about why T'Pol's opinion is bothering Archer so much. Asking Archer when he last did a bit of the old dirty little bastard is a step too far, so he tells Phlox to bollocks and leaves for another nap. It doesn't last long. The latest interruption is an escaped bat, part of Phlox's collection, so Archer's drafted to help catch it. While they do, Phlox continues his psychoanalysis of Archer and concludes the annoyance at T'Pol's judgment is because Archer wants to get jiggy with her. Archer's denials are cut short by Hoshi arriving. She deftly catches the bat before reporting that the Cretasans called again to ask why the bloody hell Archer hasn't answered their message yet. He's still not quite ready for eating humble pie, nor continuing the conversation with Phlox, so instead has another go at sleep. Even unconsciousness offers no respite for him. He dreams of a canine gravestone and the staff gathered around it, with T'Pol offering comfort. She's even more comfortable in the dream Berman chamber afterwards. At least I assume that's why she's got her baps out. The dream ends with mashing faces, which is an odd way to mourn your dead dog, but I guess we all deal with grief in our own ways. Archer's awake again. He's telling Phlox about his dream, or at least the part of it where Porthos, dog in space, died anyway. Dogs have been a constant in his life, you see, so he's rather attached. T'Pol derails the conversation by turning up with food for them. Archer awkwardly fumbles his way through an apology of sorts with unintentional references to her body parts, and she leaves after giving him a bit of Vulcan stink eye. Phlox picks up on the errors, but doesn't get the chance to analyze further as there's an alarm. Porthos, dog in space, has another problem. The latest treatment has sorted out the majority of his issues, but it wasn't able to save the pituitary gland, and that's a rather important bit of brainial meat. This is not the 24th century, so we can't just grow another, but it is still the future, and that means we have options. In this case, we're going to transplant one from a space lizard after altering the DNA. Phlox's willingness to try this, despite it never having been done before, rubs Archer the wrong way. He has a pop at Phlox for treating this like an experiment, so Phlox leaves him with the choice of whether to continue. There's not much of a choice to be made, so we go ahead, and it involves sticking our patient in a Bacta tank like what happened to Luke Skywalker in The Empire Strikes Back. The prospect of surgery has made Archer talkative, or maybe he just really enjoys distracting people when they're doing something terribly important, like when he was disarming a Romulan mine with Reed. Either way, he starts talking about a hypothetical physical attraction to T'Pol and what he should do if it ever ceases to be hypothetical. Phlox's professional opinion is that he shouldn't do anything beyond accepting it exists, and that's an opinion born of both a degree in psychiatry and being part of a significantly sized polycule. The conversation moves on to Phlox's home life and specifically his own children. It would appear that even being trained and experienced in interpersonal relationships is not a guarantee of success, as 2 of his 5 children are estranged from him and they haven't spoken in years. The honesty seems to soften Archer's mood, and he apologizes for being a bit of a dick earlier. Or perhaps it was just because he needs the practice at apologizing, given what's expected from him later on today. A formal Cretasan apology looks a whole lot like reciting words while taking a chainsaw to one of those sacred trees, which feels significantly more disrespectful than pissing on one to me, but let's ignore that for now. The Cretasans are happy with the end result, and that's what matters, I suppose. We're flying away shortly afterwards, and with more spare parts than we asked for to boot. Maybe they saw how well Archer handled a chainsaw and didn't want to risk antagonizing him afterwards. It's a positive result regardless, and he apologizes to T'Pol for his behavior, whilst also making a not particularly subtle hint about why. She either acknowledges reciprocation and declines, or shuts him right the fuck down, depending on how you read it, but the end result is her agreeing it would be negative either way. All that's left is a final visit to Sickbay to check on Porthos, dog in space, and lizard in brain. Archer's concern when seeing him is unwarranted as he's just sleeping after the surgery, so we'll leave them to make plans for what planet he can piss on next as we get ready to take another step on the long road. I try not to be overwhelmingly negative in these analyses, and there are a few things in here worth having a chat about that we'll get to, but today's story, sure as fuck, isn't one of them. Imagine my surprise to discover it was nominated for a Hugo Award. Imagine also my lack of surprise at discovering it came last. To be blunt, this is not a good story. It's a mess of conflicting directions compounded by both Archer and T'Pol acting out of character. And that's a shame, as I'm generally in favour of Trek trying to do something a bit different, and on paper, the idea of an episode that focuses on the bond between Archer and Porthos, dog in space, is a pretty good one. As I've said before a number of times, anything that helps to humanise the cast is a positive. I think the main issue undermining the attempt to show a bond here is that there's not much interaction between Archer and Porthos, dog in space. I like dogs. I've grown up with them and enjoy their company, and that seems to be an opinion they reciprocate, though I'll admit that might be because I'm a bit of a pushover on the sneaky table scraps front. Anywho, my point is that I've been around them for long enough to know that dogs are generally a tactile pet. They like to be in contact, physical affection is their bag, and the scritches, belly rubs and pull toys are part of the deal. Now consider what we see in this episode. Isolating Porthos, dog in space, might serve to show the seriousness of his infection, but it also creates a physical barrier between the two characters you're trying to showcase as having a connection. It reduces Porthos, dog in space, to little more than a prop, first figuratively when he's locked up in a box, and then quite literally when he's replaced with a stuffed toy. In short, it does the very opposite of the thing you're aiming to do. That approach may have worked if we'd paid far more attention to their relationship in prior episodes, a sense of closeness from other stories serving as a counterpoint to their separation here, but we simply don't have that background to act as a contrast. We're trying to get the payoff without investing the time, which is the same problem Star Trek has regularly run up against when trying to make us care about the death of a barely sketched out character. This attempt to create empathy, one already hampered by the approach I've just described above, is further compromised by regular tonal mismatches. The episode makes a frankly bizarre decision that what this situation really needs is comedy relief. As a result, we're told the whole event is devastating to Archer, alongside Phlox taking an electric carving knife to his toenails. It's a fascinatingly ill-conceived mismatch. So the core component of the episode is a misfire for a number of reasons, but it's far from the only issue. Pivoting into making this about Archer having an attraction towards T'Pol doesn't work for me either, not least of which because it comes out of nowhere. I've been saying for a while that Enterprise is weird about sexual objectification, and this idea feels like it was conjured up purely to give us a reason for doing it some more. As if all of that wasn't bad enough, this episode makes the cardinal sin of any story. It's boring. Great episodes speak for themselves, good ones are pleasant enough, and there's even an odd appeal to watching bad ones, but boring stories? They've got nothing. What's worse is that there were ways in which this setup could have asked some interesting questions. We could have asked what happens when the Cretaceans, a species obsessed with courtesy, did not extend the same to us by ensuring the safety of Porthos, dog in space. We don't even touch on the hypocrisy of this, no exploration of how the people who expect to be accommodated respond when the roles are reversed and they are the ones who fail. We could have asked what T'Pol's judgment of Archer means and the implications that has. She sees his anger at Porthos, dog in space, becoming ill, and interprets it as his wounded pride. What does that say about her view of keeping pets, or her opinion on the value of non-sentient species in general, for that matter? How does that gel with the principles of Iddick and finding worth in all diversity? How far would her pragmatism at wanting the engine part stretch? Would she be in favour of allowing the Cretaceans to ritually sacrifice Archer's puppy if it meant getting a new space spark plug? On reflection, maybe that's what's bothering me the most about this episode. There were ways in which it could have been more. Instead, we get something entirely forgettable. Well, that was a big old block of whining, wasn't it? So let's try and end on something more interesting. We'll start with Phlox and the Denobulan polycule system. 720 relationships with 42 potential romances. Those are the numbers Phlox throws out when he talks about his polycule. We've not done one of these for a while, so buckle up, kids, because it's chalkboard time. 2 people have 1 relationship. 3 people have 3 relationships. 4 people have 6 relationships, and so on and so forth along those lines. With each additional person, the new relationship total is the previous relationship total plus the previous number of people. Now, those of you with a mathematical bent, or sufficiently close to school age that you still remember it, you youthful bastards, may recognize this as a triangle number, the basic formula for which is xn equals n multiplied by n plus 1 divided by 2. In honesty, I had to look this up because whilst I had a vague glimmer of recollection from 30-odd years ago, that data has largely been pushed out of my brain by more important things, like how to set up signal blocks in Open Transport Tycoon Deluxe. Anywho, we can use this to calculate the Phlox polycule relationship number. Our formula then is relationships equals people multiplied by people minus 1 divided by 2. And that gives us a problem because a 38-person polycule equals 703 relationships, while a 39-person polycule gives a total of 741. Neither of those match the 720 that Phlox gave. Does that matter? Honestly, no. The numbers he gave don't really mean anything to us because we don't have more data on their culture. We don't know what he means when he says relationship. Are we just talking about the adults directly involved, or the children, parents, and siblings of those adults as well? We don't even know how that overall total relates to the romantic potentials, because we don't know things like if the arrangement allows for a member to marry someone who's already the spouse of another existing polycule member. If so, you could feasibly have a closed system as small as just 4 people who are all married to each other, or 6 if limited to purely heterosexual relationships. Basically, all of that maths was worthless because there are plenty of ways to headcanon it being right by saying certain members of the group don't have formal relationships or whatever. This little dive isn't a complete waste of time, though, because we do get another hint that he's not just limited to his 3 wives for romance, something suggested back in the Season 1 episode Dear Doctor. In that episode, he was entertaining the possibility of a romance with an admirer from the crew. At the time, we didn't know if that extramarital romance was a Denobulan cultural norm or him acting without the consent of his wives, but that whole 42 potential romances line seems to imply the former. One thing we do know for certain now is that the whole thing is far more complicated than just simple numbers. We'll end today with what seems to be an intentional couple of nods to a certain other science fiction franchise. I made a gag about Porthos, dog in space, doing a Luke Skywalker in his Bacta tank, but I don't think I'm the only one who saw that comparison. The space lizard we use for transplant was called a Calrissian chameleon, and the likelihood of a Lando Calrissian name check and a Bacta tank analogue just coincidentally being in the same episode is pretty slim. To be fair, this is not an entirely one-way street. Some cheeky wee scamp snuck the outline of a Keldon-class cruiser into the Star Wars animated series, The Clone Wars. We aren't told whether the Cardigans were on the side of the Separatists or the Republic during the Clone Wars, but based on the exploits of a certain Seagull Ducat, there's a pretty good chance the answer was both. End of episode.
I mean, it's not totally worthless, is it? A translator for Porthos, that is. The lad himself has been around Archer for the longest, so he'll have useful data.
Like what?
No idea, that's what the translator's for. That bark right there could have meant anything.
Such as saying he needs to take a dump. I'm not sure we can use that as leverage.
Maybe it's Archer's command codes. We won't know till we translate it.
So we're firmly establishing as canon that you can't understand him, are we? Because this is something you said was nebulous before.
Yeah, okay then. I definitely can't understand him and we need a translator.
Sigh. Fine, I'll go and have a word with Hoshi after all.
You're welcome, mate. Oof.